Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, what a week. Weather warnings are still in place in parts of BC and concerns now about freezing rain. Well, from street clearing to public transit, is it time for the province and municipalities to invest more in snow response? And should taxpayers pay more for it? After 12:30, recovering your plants from the snow, Brian Minter shares his tips, and as always, he's taking your questions on the open line. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on the CBC News app and on the CBC website, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube. That's at CBC Vancouver. We are into our third day of winter storm weather around BC. Commuters are once again facing long waits for buses, some dangerous roads due to black ice and pooling water this morning. It's all a familiar refrain, but with the likelihood of more severe weather systems becoming the norm, we're asking you, would you be willing to pay more taxes for snow removal and road maintenance? What about public transit because of climate change? And what else is needed for municipalities and the provincial government to invest in snow response? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 on your cell phone, pound 690. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us first from Kelowna is Gordon Lovegrove. He's a civil engineering professor with UBC Okanagan, also a Kelowna city councillor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Thanks for joining us, and we're speaking to you today with your professor hat on, not your politician one. Is that right?
That is correct. Thank you. I'm not speaking for council today.
Not speaking for council today. What about as a citizen? What's the past few days, what have they been like for you?
Well, yesterday I was in an interview with the Vancouver Sun while waiting at a bus stop, and the bus came, and I got on, and I went, and it was on time. So that's one thing that I'm experiencing. I'm also, I like to walk or bike when it's not snowing, but I like to walk. So I walked here. I'm currently sitting in City Hall today, and the sidewalks, most of them are shoveled, but not all. So it's a bit of a trek, and that's a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm. That is something we've been hearing about a lot today around Metro Vancouver. You know, my colleagues and us as well. I took my kids to school today, and certainly making our way through a lot of snow mounds and then dealing with ice and slush as well. What goes through your mind when you hear, again, another series of complaints from Metro Vancouver transit users? What do you think of that when you hear the response?
Well, I am one of those people caught in this weather, and I absolutely can relate that it's frustrating when you can't keep the same travel time to get from A to B. You're in the habit of doing it every day, and then one day you can't do it anymore. So I back up, and I personally have the self-check and hold on, allow yourself a little bit more time, a little bit more space if you're driving. Lower the expectations. It's one of those crazy days. I mean, it was funny because I heard UBC suspended classes. In fact, the whole school district suspended classes. Then I realized, wait a sec, that's Vancouver.
Yes.
Because UBC, I gave a guest lecture yesterday. UBC, the classes were still there.
Gordon, are you there? I think we might have lost our phone connection with Gordon Lovegrove, a civil engineering professor at UBC Okanagan. Gordon, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can. So pardon me, did you end up giving a Zoom lecture yesterday, or?
No, it was in person, and I got there. Classes were still being held at UBC in the Okanagan.
Yes.
And the school district classes, I was actually giving guest reading to grade 1 and 2s, they were still happening as well. So our schools up here in Kelowna didn't shut down. Our university didn't shut down.
Okay.
And the buses are happening. So, but the problem is that it's not the same everywhere, Michelle. It depends how often it happens, and if you're used to it. Well, of course, you're used to it, but things that happen in Vancouver, and I was born and raised in Vancouver, extreme weather, extreme snows, those are few and far between. But unfortunately, I think we have to do a rethink. Now we know they're going to be more frequent, and so we have to do a little bit more planning and be proactive to get our snow battle plans updated.
Okay. We spoke with the mayor of the township of Langley the other day, and he was scheduled to come into our studio from Langley and decided to stay home, of course. But he was talking about their municipality playing catch up when it comes to investing in snow response and street clearing. And so do you think municipalities need to perhaps allot more in their budgets for that and not think so much about, well, this only happens a few times a year. Is it really worth it?
Well, I'm going to let each municipality decide if they're going to actually buy more snow plows. I mean, obviously, it would be ridiculous to have one parked, year round, and it doesn't have a dump of snow that year. So we have to be careful, and it's a balance of priorities. There are so many different ways, and people are amazing, creative in how they do that. What about just having contractors that they may be, for example, right outside my house, it was a landscape company. They can't in the snow, but they can plow snow and shovel sidewalks. So contractors are looking for ways to keep their crews employed year-round. Yes, cities can buy a few. It's always a debate, how much do you have in-house versus how much do you contract out?
Right.
And so that's the trade-off. I'm going to let each municipality come up with that. But remember, at the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer, and they want it today. Like, that's nice to talk about it in the future. We need those snow battle plans updated with priority 1 routes, including buses and bus routes, the main roads, and then priority 2, 3, 4. To be taken care of. And that's the updating, and that's the plan that needs to happen. But meanwhile, we're stuck here today with the snow today.
Yeah, it's about your experience today. Do you think taxpayers going through their walk today or waiting for a bus, would they consider paying more in taxes to go toward more funding for snow response, whatever level of government it may be?
Well, I love that question because, in fact, before I was ever on city council, the Kelowna City Council, in their wisdom previously, did a poll of residents and asked exactly those kinds of questions. They said, okay, here are services and levels of service, and here's what the tax implications are for each one of those. Are you in favor? And those are the frank conversations we now need to be having right across the board in this changing climate. And time and time again, our residents, now this is the survey response, I'm not speaking for the mayor or anybody here, have said, yes, we will pay more to have those level of services increased.
We'll we'll conduct our own survey here on the open line as well, Gordon. Thank you very much. Good to speak good to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for what you do, and everybody stay safe out there. Thank
Absolutely.
you again. Bye-bye.
Gordon Lovegrove, UBC Okanagan civil engineering professor. We're asking you, would you be willing to pay more taxes for snow removal, road maintenance, public transit expansion because of climate change, as we expect more severe weather events to take place? What else do you think is needed for municipalities and provincial response? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We're going to stay in the Okanagan, and Monica is on the line from Penticton. Hi, Monica.
Hello.
Does there need to be more investment?
Yes, I would love to pay more taxes for a train to be reinitiated, because there's a lot of people that commute from either Kelowna to Vernon or to Penticton or vice versa. And when they discontinued the train, they crippled a lot of seniors, and there's a whole lot of single drivers. There's one person in a vehicle, which doesn't is not very good for climate change. And I think a lot of the semis, there's a lot of them traveling on the highways now, and I think they should have to pay more taxes because they're the ones creating a lot of road damage. And I believe they cause a lot of problems in Summerland with the continual landslides with their vibrations and that.
Okay, so
really
maintenance as well.
Mm-hmm. We really need a train back.
Okay, bring the train back. Can I ask you what your experience has been the past couple of days?
Absolutely crippling. The bus service in Penticton is crazy. They have two buses that go the same direction once an hour or half hour, and it's impossible. And you have to stand out in the cold, and usually you miss it, or it's who knows what goes on. And the same thing apparently in Kamloops too. I found an old letter to the editor, and it's definitely true in Kamloops, where you're stranded at a crazy station at the mall downtown, and it's just absolutely insane. So no, the train, I prefer the train. That's what I used to. I'm a senior, and the train was beautiful. I grew up in Toronto, and I loved the subway. It was always on, always there, always reliable, and definitely need a train here because you can't be catching all these crazy city buses at crazy times and then having to hop on an e-bus and this and that. I absolutely haven't been able to travel since the Greyhound's been gone, and neither have a lot of people. So
The end of that service as well. That's another conversation we've had here on the show for sure. Thank you so much, Monica.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Take care, Monica in Penticton. And we're taking your calls, asking you, would you be willing to pay more in taxes for more snow removal infrastructure, things like street clearing, public transit? As she mentioned there, what about road maintenance as well? And whether trucks, semi-truck operators should be paying more for that. I'd love to hear from you. Does there need to be more investment in snow response in BC? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 are our phone numbers. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Well, after this week's snow dumps, councillors for New Westminster and Surrey are renewing their call to the region and the province to have a snow summit to better coordinate those snowstorm responses. Surrey Councillor Linda Annis and New Westminster Councillor Daniel Fontaine first called for a snow summit. You'll remember this back in November 2022. That was Snowmageddon. The region was paralyzed by that huge snowstorm. Councillor Daniel Fontaine joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Well, what are your thoughts after this week?
Well, it's deja vu all over again. It's time for us to yet again call for a snow summit and for us to have, as we've just heard within the last few minutes, a more proactive approach to dealing with snow events. I mean, Metro Vancouver is a complex region. We have over 20 municipalities. Layer on top of that, all the provincial road and bridges. It's a very complex area, and snowstorms don't know municipal boundaries. They hit the entire region at the same time. So I think it only makes sense, the Snow Summit, to bring the experts together, to bring the ICBC, TransLink, some of the road engineers, some experts to talk about how we can deal with these better in the future. Because one thing that we haven't heard a lot about in the last few days is the impact to our local economy on this. And I'd had a call earlier today from someone from Calgary who heard an interview I did, and he said they were able to quantify that every time Calgary shut down as a result of a snowstorm, it was something like $10 million of economic activity per hour that they were losing in the city of Calgary. So I can only imagine what that is costing our region when the third largest economy in Canada is shutting down for 1 to 3 centimeters of snow. So the Snow Summit is way overdue. It's time for us to have different approaches moving forward.
And so, you know, the past couple of days, we haven't seen the very, very long commutes home that we did see November 2022. I mean, hours and hours on end. And it does seem like a lot of people stayed home. You know, school districts were closed throughout Metro Vancouver, or schools rather were closed throughout Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. Some still closed, mostly in the Fraser Valley today. When things are closed down and people decide to stay home or take the day off, that is not a solution for you then, because that has an impact on the economy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've heard from people who've had to stay home, who their employer does not pay for a snow day, so they've lost income for those couple of days. They're further to that, the actual employers lost sales at their particular sites. People can't get goods from point A to point B. We've seen, post-secondary institutions close down, schools close down, parents having to scramble to stay home to take care of kids. I mean, it could go on and on about the impact of these snow events. And at some point, I'm hoping some of our collective regional and provincial leadership will bring those experts together. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for someone to book a room and bring some people into that room and have a discussion on how we can better handle these events. And I mean, perhaps if we look back even just a week ago with the first snow event that happened, we were talking, 1 to 3 centimeters of snow in mid-afternoon, shut the entire transportation system and the entire road network of the third largest economy in Canada. I mean, we got to do better than that.
And if the conclusion at this meeting with all these experts is invest more, who should pay for that?
Well, look, I haven't jumped to that conclusion yet. And that's part of the reason why I think we need to go to the Snow Summit to actually look, are there different ways that we can approach this? And you heard from one of my colleagues in Kelowna who indicated that perhaps there's things like having that surge capacity available. I've had literally dozens and dozens of great suggestions come to me in the last year in terms of how we can manage this. Not one of them had to do with putting higher taxes in. It comes to perhaps having a different approach to how we're dealing with this, making sure that we do have some surge capacity, that we have better collaboration and cooperation between the 21 municipalities in Metro Vancouver, and some communications as well. I mean, I've talked about using our emergency alert system on our cell phone, perhaps giving the public information on when they should be leaving home, staggering those departures, et cetera. There's lots of things we can do. I'm not running to the conclusion that we have to necessarily increase property taxes, but all I can say is this is a core function of civic government. Civic government, when people elect their civic government, one of the core functions is they expect that those roads are going to be kept clear and those transit routes are going to be available for people. And if we're not meeting that core function, we have to look at ourselves and ask, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing as municipalities?
Oh, we're asking our callers, our audience as well, what they think about whether there is a need for more investment. A rethink, as you heard Daniel Fontaine say, a rethink of snow response in municipalities and the province. And if the cost were to increase, would you be willing to pay more taxes? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Justin is on the line in Nanaimo. Hi, Justin.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me fine?
Yes, I can hear you just fine, doing well. And how was the highway over in Nanaimo?
Oh, the highway's not too bad now. But, I'd just like to weigh in on this topic here
Yes.
of this is what happens when you privatize your highways, right? So if you understand how that works, I used to work for that company that would do that. And
Do you mean the maintenance, of
That's right,
highways?
correct.
Okay.
Yes. So you have to go through a class and learn the preparation of what to do and put on your plows and the speed limit you're allowed to do and sanding, salting, hills. There's all kinds of rules and regulations that you have to jump through. So for the 2 or 3 or 4 days that we have of snow here, they only run on a bare minimum of people, right, of hiring. So when you have a government selected people like that, like the city, for instance, they have all hands on deck. You have people that are running plows. They're used to what's going on, right?
Okay.
But for the highways, it's a whole other ball game. Like
Right.
they can't just hire anybody right off the top because they have to go through these classes and shit happens. Right?
The contract,
That's correct.
things are contracted out. Justin, thank you very much for that. That is the case with highways maintenance. And it's interesting because that goes back to what Gordon Lovegrove said earlier. You could have, a debate around whether contracting out is a solution. If you have snowplows, he was talking about snowplows. Do you hire or contract out to snowplows that are at the ready? But Justin's saying here there are issues that come up when you do that. So that's an interesting part of the conversation. Trevor is up next now at Williams Lake. Hi, Trevor.
Morning.
Good afternoon. What are your thoughts on investment in snow response?
Oh, I think the biggest problem is, I'm in the interior where we have winter, except for maybe this year, and you have the municipalities are geared up, and like the previous caller said, they can peel off from other departments to deal with the snow. The highways department, they have challenges, especially in the Lower Mainland, where they don't have, they can't just sit with all these people at the ready unless the taxpayers want to fund a lot more plowing.
And you run a snowplow business, is that right?
Yeah, I also run a side business doing snow plowing, and for us, I know a lot of the local guys, insurance has just been astronomical increases, and a lot of people have got out of it, or they're not telling their customers they don't have liability insurance. Okay,
so it sounds like there's a shortage as well of people.
It's hard. Like my liability insurance went from $500 a year years ago, basically a 4-month window, to over $5,000 a year, and that doesn't even, your ICBC insurance or your vehicle,
There's
your cost of fuel, your cost of sand, all that.
all the cost to that. Trevor, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go. The connection isn't so great. Might be because of the winter conditions. Really appreciate hearing from you in Williams Lake. And Daniel Fontaine, thank you very much for weighing in on this, yet another iteration of this conversation, right? Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Michelle.
Daniel Fontaine is a New Westminster City Councillor. It's 12:26, 1:26 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today. And it is the third day of schools being closed for many families today. Most of those are in the Fraser Valley, Langley, Abbotsford, and Chilliwack. In Metro Vancouver, schools are open, much to the chagrin of some teens in my household, but perhaps relief for parents, because as much fun as snow days can be, it can be challenging to rearrange your day, miss work, or find childcare. Well, the CBC spoke to these parents yesterday at a park.
I'm not having too much of a hard time. I mean, it's a bit of inconvenience, but I'm sure for working parents, like both are working, it's definitely like a difficult situation.
Folks who are capable of working from home, they can just call in and say, hey, I like to work from home today, I can't get childcare. But for many of us, the working poor, I don't think that's an option. It's just like you have to stay at home with your kid. You can't bring your kid to a factory. I can't bring him to a construction site. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough balance, isn't it? Now, for its part, school officials say they made the decision to keep schools closed because of ice and hazardous road conditions. You heard from our guest yesterday from the Surrey School District as well on that. And yes, weather warnings still in place. Travel advisories issued across Southwest BC with snow and freezing rain forecast. There are still thousands, this morning anyway, thousands without power in the Fraser Valley. And Fraser Valley schools, of course, closed. There are travel advisories for Highway 1 through the Fraser Valley. And when it comes to temperatures, we are at 9 in Tofino, -5 in Nelson, and +1. Ooh, we made it to 1 in Vancouver. Well, in this cold weather, do your plants need to be dug up or recover from the cold? We have Brian Minter joining us with some tips for that. And as always, he is taking your questions on the open line. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, #690, and our email bctoday@cbc.ca. And Brian Minter is here, putting the chill in Chilliwack. Hello.
Hi, Michelle. Hey,
It's cold.
We were right on a couple of weeks ago when we talked about getting ready for the cold, because
Yes.
I think it was a lot worse than we really anticipated. And so at this point here, it's a couple of things. Number one's the recovery in terms of how our plants are going to survive. And sometimes it's not going to be a happy situation. But again, gardening is a learning process, and this has certainly been part of it, Michelle. But I think one of the most important things right now is you just have to kind of assess everything. But like anything that was left out, all the annuals, tender perennials, Dracaena palms, all those sorts of things, if they even in Vancouver probably would have not made this type of cold. And in terms of the plants outside right now, and it goes back to our zones, Michelle. If it's hardy for our particular zone, you probably are going to be okay. If it's a zone 7 or 8 plant, probably not going to be okay. And remember, the key is when you take a plant out of the ground and put it in a container, you lose another zone of hardiness. So those are all things that we really take into consideration at this point. The best thing we can get right now is rain. We've had a bit of snow, and the snow was wonderful to be able to draw frost out of so many plants. But right now we're looking at the rain rehydrating, and that's probably the most important thing we could possibly do right now, which is very, very important. And Michelle, the other thing I'm worried about is so many folks put their plants indoors simply because they were, they had no other place to go. Now that it's not freezing, you can just gently get them outdoors. Now we're talking, the hardier, tougher plants right now. Some of the tougher herbs, for example, maybe with some of the perennials, you had no other place to put them. You're in an apartment and you brought them inside. Now the frost is over. What you really need to do is get them outside, make sure they don't overwater things, just keep them moist, and just see if we can get them reacclimatized to the outside now that the temperatures are at a point where the plants should be okay.
Good to hear. I think people are really just tuned in very, very carefully to everything you're saying, Brian, because this is something that everybody's experiencing right now. And Brian Minter, you're going to stick around and take some calls from our listeners, right?
You bet. Love to do that. Absolutely. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about, including seeding.
Yes.
Time for seeding.
Seeding and the timing and when you should actually do it. Hint, not now. Brian Minter, our longtime gardening columnist here on the show. He's going to take your questions coming up in our next half hour on the open line. And that's coming up after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Freezing rain has led to the closure of schools in a handful of districts. They are mostly in the Fraser Valley. Schools are open in Vancouver, Surrey, and elsewhere around the metro region. A new French elementary school is coming to the north side of Burnaby. The province has committed more than $40 billion to build the three-story school with a capacity of 360 students. The government expects construction to begin next summer. And the Vancouver Canucks have extended Jim Rutherford's contract by 3 years. The 74-year-old was hired as president of hockey operations a little more than 2 years ago. The Canucks currently have the most points in the NHL. And now taking a look at the forecast, freezing rain warnings continue for several areas, including the Fraser Valley, as well as sections of the north and central coast. Snowfall warnings are in effect for several areas as well, including Prince George, the Shuswap, and the North Thompson. Elsewhere on the north coast, rain or freezing rain with strong winds and a high of 0. Highs to -20 and cloudy in the Peace. Highs from -13 to -5 with snow in the West Kootenay, a chance of flurries in the East Kootenay. In the southern interior, light snow with a high of -6. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, rain this afternoon with highs around 5. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. You know, I had my kids waiting with bated breath this morning. Our schools closed in Metro Vancouver.
Did they make the cut?
To their disappointment, they did not. And so packing up all the bags and the lunches, I took them into school this morning.
Back to reality.
Yeah, so much for that.
It's kind of a wet day today, though. It wouldn't exactly be a snow day. So
no, yeah, I guess it was a little bit hard to justify, but yeah, they would have liked it. They would have liked it.
They'll bounce back, Michelle. They will.
I feel their pain. The struggle is real.
Sure.
Oh, dear. Rob, thank you.
Sure thing.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Yes, we talked about this yesterday as well, with schools closing throughout Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. We talked about getting around in the snow for pedestrians. We got some emails too. Sharon wrote us, we need to change our values and mindset. The fact is there are only a handful of kids who need to drive to school. Most kids live within 2 kilometers of their neighborhood school but get driven there because it's convenient. If we forced homeowners, business owners, and cities to do the right thing and clear sidewalks and crosswalks as a priority, not an afterthought, then people could walk or roll to school. Sharon, thank you very much for that. And we got this email from Brent in Beasley. Your noon program on snow removal was interesting, especially the guest who uses a wheelchair in Langford. And he says, I found the plow operator went above and beyond for her, but it wasn't enough. Bear in mind, these snowfall events in Langford do not last very long. And usually it's a short waiting game for the snow to be gone. There's Brent right now sending us a photo of his snowplow. Thanks so much for that. Our email, of course, is bctoday@cbc.ca. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us here on CBC. We're on Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC News on our news app, as well as cbc.ca/BC and the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And yes, every second Friday, our gardening columnist Brian Minter joins us to take your questions. And he's with us now live from Country Garden Limited in Chilliwack. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Brian, yes, timing for seeds, because people get very excited to get them in the ground.
Oh, this weather is certainly an incentive to get something planted, no question. And, but the seeds are everywhere. It has to explain that in Canada, we are one of the most careful countries in terms of making sure we have viable seed. In most countries, seed racks would be full of seeds all through the year, not in Canada. They have to be taken back, tested for viability, for germination, to make sure that when they get into stores across the country and seed houses and so on, that they're going to have a certain percentage of germination. So that's a good thing for the country. But in West, you're picking up a few seeds because a lot of people are keen on getting certain varieties, and early bird gets the worm in those situations. But the point is, number one is, I think we buy too many seeds. You only need enough seeds to be able to, how many tomato plants are we going to plant, right? Maybe there's 15 or 20 or 30 tomatoes in a package. Well, that'll last for 2 years. And by the way, seeds will keep if you put them in the freezer. That's where we highly recommend that. But, and here's the situation. Last year was kind of a perfect example. We really didn't get warmer temperatures, and it stopped getting so cold and wet with the rain until the end of April. And a lot of folks, oh gosh, I'm going to get things going and get them ready to go. But it should be, and always remember this, about 10 degrees Celsius in the daytime before plants can do even the early ones go out to be safe, like early onions and so on. And it should be for the warmer ones 10 degrees Celsius at nighttime. And that's where it's usually about the middle to latter part of May before we start getting those temperatures. So that's the time before you can put them outside. So what do you do in the meantime? And if you get a hold of a good seed catalog, and there's some good ones in the country. West Coast Seeds have an excellent catalog, very, very helpful. Stokes, for example, and other companies have great seed catalogs. They tell you an approximate time for seeding. And the irony is here, back in Ontario or Quebec, it's about the same as we do here. Where we brag, we get an earlier start. But the timing is pretty critical in terms of when you put them in. So there's a natural sequence of putting your seed in the ground or in your tray or wherever you're going to start them actually coming up, hardening up and toughening up to go outside, and then go outside. Once you leave them in an area like it's warm, not enough light and so on, the seedlings stretch. And of course, it's a do-over. And we don't want to do that. So being late is a little bit better than being too early. So you've got lots of time. The only proviso is so many of our wonderful young folks love hot peppers, like really hot peppers. And if you actually look at the time to maturity, some of those are 120 days, 150 days, and so on. Wow. Those guys need an earlier start. So if you're going to grow some of those very, very hot peppers, probably a good time to get them going right now.
Okay, that's the exception. That's very interesting, Brian. Thank you very much. Brian Minter, our gardening, I like good hot sauce as well. So Brian Minter with Country Garden Limited in Chilliwack. And we're taking your questions for Brian. In fact, Russ is calling us from Nanaimo with a question about seeds. Hi there, Russ.
Yeah, hi guys. Hi, Brian. A quick question for you regarding starting seeds inside the house.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty keen gardener. I want to get this thing going as soon as I can. But what I did last year was I started the same tomato seed in 2 batches, same conditions, same everything. The difference was one batch was started from seed 6 weeks before the other. And at the end of the day, I found no difference in production of the tomatoes. And so I'm wondering, is there any value starting early, or is it all about the heat unit that will determine how well the plants will grow and produce?
Yeah, and Russ, you've nailed it right there. Absolutely. As long as a tomato has enough time to mature, because if you actually go and look at seed catalogs, it'll tell you how many days. For most of the early tomatoes, it's about 70, 75 days. For some of the later, bigger tomatoes, it's about 80, 90 days. That's the time frame, and we know they love the heat, so they can't go before the end of May. So if you count out end of May, you go all June, July, August. That's almost for the bigger tomatoes, the latter part of August before they're going to produce for you. So yeah, cheating a little bit, and this is where starting things inside where some of the plants where you can control them. Put them near a cool window, keep them down, because you've already gained by getting them started 2 or 3 weeks. And that 2 or 3 weeks at the end of the latter part of the season gives you fruit so much earlier. So I agree with starting things early. It just, you have to have capabilities of not only keeping them short and compact, but having some place to put them in a protected area outside to harden them up and toughen them up. So Russ, you're bang on, absolutely.
And Russ, can you tell us what kinds of peppers you like to plant?
Well, I like the regular bell peppers, but I'm also a big fan of making my own hot sauce, and I do a lot of hot peppers as well. So I do start my habaneros pretty early, pretty much end of this month. But everything else for tomatoes and other peppers, I wait till early March. Is that about the right time?
Russ, thank you for saying that, because a lot of folks want to get them going to panicking. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be late. And the end of February, early March is when we do most of ours, and that's perfect timing, Russ. I love the fact that you're doing that. Your timing is, you've pretty much made it clear to everyone that timing is everything, and thanks for doing that, Russ.
Thank you, Brian.
Good job, Russ. Thank you very much. Enjoy your hot sauce this year. As Russ in Nanaimo. And Scott is joining us now from Surrey. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
Hi. What's your question for Brian?
My question, Brian, is I have 2 plum trees. One bears fruit about 6 weeks before the other one does.
Mm-hmm.
But the other one, I've never had a problem. It always gives me lots of plums, which is fine. But the other one, this year I got 3 plums on it, and that was it. That tree is a lot more juicier plum. And my question to you is, that's question number 1. For putting on, what type of fertilizer should I use now to kind of spruce it up? And also my blueberry tree that I bought at a farmer's market last year, a huge tree. I think it's quite old, but I'm afraid that I might not get no fruit off it this year, as some other people who bought there didn't get either. So my question there is, what type of fertilizer that I can put on those trees now?
Okay, so both, pardon me, so just to keep track here, it's the plum tree that hasn't been bearing a lot of fruit, and the blueberry bush as well that he bought from a farmer's market. What kind of fertilizer would he use?
Yeah, Russ, all good questions, and thank you for that. Number one, in terms of getting fruit, there's 2 issues here. Number one, on your plum tree, you could go look at the buds right now. And they're cold. We've had a bit of a cold spell. They're holding back a bit now, but in a week or 2, they'll be more pronounced. You could go to the plum tree and look and see the number of flower buds on the tree. Those are potentially plums. If you've got lots of flower buds, we're in good shape. If you don't have lots of flower buds, we need to start retraining the tree, Scott, so that the branches are going horizontal, straight across instead of up and down, or even bend them down. So the more the actual tree goes in a horizontal shape, you're going to get more buds forming and more fruit. So that's number one, but you can tell that right now how many fruits you're going to get. Second thing is, when they open, are they going to get pollinated? Are we going to have a wet period where the pollinators can't get out? So you have to make sure that, when those blossoms are open and ready to be pollinated, that you're maybe there as well with a Q-tip it doesn't take very long to pollinate a lot of flowers. The pollinators aren't there. So those are things you want to watch. In terms of fertilizer, good question. We talk about it in the program a lot, a BC-made product. It's flower and veg food, 10, 15, 19. Lots of phosphorus and potash around the drip line of the tree to ensure that the higher phosphorus and potash will put the tree in more of a producing fruit and sizing up fruit. And the last thing about your blueberry, you can tell right now in the blueberry, you can go and see the buds. If there's a little buds starting to form right now, those are potentially fruit buds. But on a bigger plant, Scott, it takes a few years for those plants to really become established. Please put lots of fir, hemlock, bark mulch in the planting hole and around the roots as much as you can, so that it quickly re-roots and becomes established, and then you'll be okay. Type of fertilizer I prefer for blueberries, a well-balanced, slow release, 14, 14, 14, again around the drip line of the plant, the outside of the plant, and that will make a huge difference for you. So good luck on the plums, and give me a call. We'll go take a look at 3 and see how we're doing.
Yes.
So good luck, Scott.
Before you go, where is a good place to buy fertilizers? I find a lot of the places we buy it from, I find it so expensive.
Yeah, some things are. I guess just check out various garden stores. A lot of the co-op stores are out there right now. They have, perhaps because they deal with the farming community, perhaps a little bit less expensive. But don't forget, when you're looking for a fertilizer, the reason I recommend 10-50-90 because it has the micronutrients in it, the iron, the boron, the copper, all the things that the plant needs. So it's not just a regular Bland X fertilizer. It's something that's very complete. And I love, too, that it's pushing the organics. It's 40% organic. So it's got all the right elements. And sometimes those are a little more expensive, Scott, but very worthwhile.
Yes, there you go. A really good point, Scott. But there you have it as well, that the specific reasons as to why that would be better for your plants. Thanks so much for the call about your plum tree and your blueberry bush. Naomi is up next now in Nanaimo. Hi, Naomi.
Hi, Brian. I have a columnar apple tree, a couple of years old. I have three. This one in particular, the bark is cracking, and quite visibly. It produces a lot of apples. They all produce apples, and but this one in particular is cracking, and I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah, and Naomi, that's a good question. What I'd like you to do is when it starts to dry out and so on, I'd like you to get some copper spray. It's available on most garden store shelves. But copper is the control for blight on tomatoes, by the way, and potatoes as well. But what it really does is prevent, it's European canker that normally starts a lot of this. And copper won't cure it, but it keeps it under control. And sometimes just physiological damage, being very, very hot, again, the south side of a tree, or sometimes in winter when it's very cold, when you get a bit of sun on, that can cause bark to crack as well. But I'm mostly concerned about the European canker. Copper spray, I would say 3 or 4 times during the spring when it's dry. It'll get it under control. And if it's splitting away, take a knife and clean off the bark so it's very tight against it. We don't get insects going there as well. But the tree will recover. And so not to worry about that, but that's what I would do.
Oh, that's reassuring, Naomi. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Get
Bye-bye.
that tree back into shape and spray it with copper. Really good question as well about your cracking bark on your apple tree, Naomi. Let's head up island now to Campbell River, and Grant is on the line. Hello, Grant.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for calling in.
Thank you very much for taking my call. Hi, Brian. I appreciate the time. I talked to you a few years ago about, I think they were emerald cedar for a hedge, and so I planted some of them, and unfortunately, they half of them died, and not sort of in a row either. They one died, then one alive. They didn't work very well. And I don't know if I didn't water them enough during the summer. I know their roots are rather shallow, but they didn't work. And I'm just wondering if you had another suggestion as an alternative to the golden cedar as a hedge that is tall. Is tall. I'm in Campbell River, and I live right on the ocean, so it may have been salt, may have been wind. I don't know.
Yeah, and Grant, there's many people in your same position right now. When you get long periods of drought without any rain, and the cedars do stress out, they need that extra watering. And with water restrictions, we're reluctant to start doing things like that. But you're going to have to hand water individual trees and look after them. But, I'm just finding, just observation, this is anecdotally, Grant, I'm really loving the yew trees. And particular, I like the Hillii, Hillii, because it doesn't have the poisonous berries, but it grows very, very quickly. And you can buy them as smaller plants. Grant, you don't have to have huge ones. But give it a try, because their roots go down deeper. We had them at our gardens for 40 years, and they were absolutely fine. And absolutely love them. But the Hillii yew might be a nice alternative. And as the weather changes and the climate changes, we're looking for different alternatives. And I would sure take a look at that, Grant, because I think it makes a more stable, more deeply rooted hedge that will require less maintenance over time.
Will be able to withstand it. Go ahead.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I just wondered. They're a thick tree though, like the cedar as well.
Yeah, no. Well, it's either over time. The smaragd stays reasonably. We have to prune them to keep them narrow. But the Hilii is more of a compact variety, fast growing, and it more upright than spreading. And that's why I love the plant. It's the favorite right now for many folks. So
Wow.
please take a look at them and give them a try. I think they're well worthwhile, and I know you'd enjoy them, and it'll be easier for you.
Grant, thank you very much. Let's say that again, Brian. The Hilii?
Yes, Hillii.
Hill.
Michelle, yeah, we're into Latin, Michelle, here. Okay, so don't forget the I on the end.
This is where you lost me. Yes.
Yeah.
If anyone was wanting to do a quick Google search, there you go. Hilii, Hill.
But it's Taxus. Remember, it's a Taxus, first of all. That's the genetic family of use, the Taxus.
Okay. There you go. Let's take another call now. Johnny at Sydney. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Hi, Johnny.
I have a question for you about an indoor plant. It's a Myers lemon that is in full bloom right now. But I'm getting these little bugs. They seem to be. Well, first of all, it was attacked by ants for a while, but I managed to stop those by putting that sticky stuff around the the trunk. So that sorted that one out. But now I'm getting a flying insect that seems to be laying something on the new blossoms and underneath the new leaves only. And I'm using safer soap. I'm just wondering if that is sufficient to try to control that.
Yeah, it's one thing I would recommend. And by the way, Johnny, using the Trounce of the safer soaps, Trounce is the cocktail of all the fatty soaps, and it's more and more effective. But remember, insects are pretty clever, like fungus. They'll quickly develop an immunity. The other one I love and use a lot, and it's organic, is horticultural oil. At the growing season ratio, which is very mild, between the two of them, you'll be able to get control there. The only other problem I find it challenging, it's not good to spray when the blossoms are open, simply because there's no pollinated insects out this time of year, I know, but always try not to spray or miss the blossom when you do, which is hard with the flowering lemon. But those are the two I would alternate to get really good control done.
Okay, Johnny, thank you so much. Go ahead, Johnny.
What was the name of the first product, sorry?
Oh, the Trounce is the best of the safer soap, called Trounce. And then the other one is horticultural oil.
Horticultural oil. I wrote that one down
Thanks,
as well.
Michelle.
Johnny, thank you so much for the call, and good luck to you. Eleanor is at our last caller in Rossland. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my call. I have a old Hawthorn tree, about over 50 years old. And after the unusual winter we had in 2022, it did not lose its leaves. So last spring it produced leaves and blooms, and as usual. But as the summer progressed, a good portion of the leaves turned brown and appeared to die. And I'm just wondering, should we be cutting those branches off, or?
Yeah, Eleanor, we're coming into the time of pruning for a lot of the deciduous trees, and that's something we need to take a look at. And one thing all of us have to remember, that we're in a new climate right now. We're getting hotter, more intense and cold, and more intense heat. It's stressing trees. So there's three things I would do, Eleanor. Number one, around the drip line of the tree, really over the wintertime before the dormant season ends, get some good organic matter, build up that soil. Well-rotted manure, good compost, get it around the drip line, really help that tree. That's where the roots are. That's where you'll support them. And as we talked to some of our callers earlier, let's get some nutrient on that as well. I think to revive a tree, I would use time-release nitrogen. And some of our lawn fertilizers are exactly that. So get that nitrogen that's time-release worked in as the growing season begins. And Eleanor, this year, let's also take more care to water thoroughly and deeply. Wherever we are, we're getting water restrictions, but do water thoroughly and deeply to kind of revive the tree. And then you're right. Let's get some pruning done. Let's look at the tree. Is there any dead wood? Open it up, more air, more sunlight. It's got to penetrate into that tree to help the branches along. So changing the soil around the drip line, getting some high nitrogen fertilizer, and getting the dead wood out, pruning back, getting the tree back into better shape. Those are all three things, Eleanor, I think you can do, because it's hawthorns last forever. They're long-lived trees, so it's worth the time to look after them.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, really good job as well, keeping an eye on how it's doing, Eleanor. Thank you so much for the call from Rossland. And Brian, you are off on a trip, aren't you?
Oh gosh, yeah. And it hasn't been happening. A lot of things in the world because of COVID were shut down.
Yeah.
But the one of the leading horticultural shows is in Essen, Germany. It's an IPM show, and the beautiful thing and Europe is really quite far ahead of us in terms of. Don't forget, they've got 700 million people who are passionate about gardening. So you see a lot of new things, new trends, new ideas, new thoughts, new plants. And so I'm going to sneak over there for a few days and while the show is open, to take a look to see, because it helps us all here. When you visit other parts of the world, you get some new ideas, different perspectives, how they're dealing with climate and how they're dealing with lawns and how they're dealing with water shortages. And so really looking forward to that.
Oh,
so next time I'm here, you don't want to miss that, because we're going to load you up with a lot of great new ideas.
That's exactly right. Can't wait to hear your report back. Safe travels to you.
Thank you.
Take care, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Brian Minter from Country Garden Limited in Chilliwack. That's about it for us here on BC Today. A couple of emails. We got to our first topic on would you pay more for investment in snow removal? Should BC and the province and the municipalities invest more in snow response? Well, we got an email from Pam who writes, I would not be willing to pay more tax for increased expenditures for snow removal in the Lower Mainland, which at most faces 2 or 3 days of chaos before everything turns to normal. Municipalities have more important and pressing uses for their limited tax dollars, most especially adaptations to impending challenges posed by climate change. Pam, thank you very much. Our email again is bctoday@cbc.ca. And that's it for us here today. Thanks to everyone who called in as well and emailed us. And you can listen again to the program on the CBC Listen app and watch us again on demand on YouTube, CBC Vancouver. My thanks to our amazing team here on the show: Alan Regan, Melody Jacobson, George Baker, Jake Costello, Bradley Stewart, Eric Pankratz, Mel Carter, and Mark Fairfield. Thanks to Megan Zwick and David Jones as well. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you so much for joining us here on BC Today. Have a nice weekend. Stay warm and dry. We'll be back Monday.